Hey everyone, I'm Amanda, and this is Mommy's Reading Chair. "2019 is just about done. In fact, today is the last day, and I can't believe it. This year has been so interesting. I didn't really set out to read a whole lot this year because it was a challenging year for me, but I wound up reading more in the second half of the year than I ever expected to. So this year, I only aspired to read 30 books, which is really low for me, but again, I was having a really challenging year. I started 2019 in the midst of a very difficult year at work, and I was also pregnant for the majority of 2019. This pregnancy was, I don't want to say it was the most difficult thing I've ever done, but it was a difficult pregnancy. I couldn't stay awake. I was sick all the time. And on top of being a teacher and a mom to a then 2-year-old, there was just no time in the day. I had to put my hobbies aside for this reason. So that being said, I actually started reading a lot more after my daughter was born, which actually really surprised me. So I set out to read 30 books this year. I wound up ending the year at 28, and I'm pleased with that because I had set the goal of 30 books before I knew it was going to be a difficult pregnancy. So, I'll take it. However, next year I do intend to read a lot more, knowing that my child is very chill. My son will be going to school more full time in the latter half of 2020. So I've got a lot to look forward to for 2020. But let's go ahead and finally wrap up 2019. The 28 books I read. It wasn't necessarily a great year book-wise for me. I had some really good books that I read, but wasn't the best. So the first book I read in 2019 is called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This was a Christmas gift last year from one of my friends in my book club, and I decided to go ahead and open the year with it. It was a really short read, and it was about a culture that I hadn't really read a lot about, if I've ever read anything about it, and it was absolutely fascinating. It's a book that was written in a different language and then translated into English, so some of it was not necessarily difficult to read, but I'm fairly certain that some of the things in this culture maybe don't have an English word, so there was a glossary at the end, which was very, very handy. So the story is about a man in Africa and the trials and struggles he goes through as being considered a strong man. And the gender differences in this culture are so vast, and there's so many things that, I don't relate to, or somebody in the United States wouldn't relate to, and I thought that aspect of the book was very, very fascinating. This is actually a series. I'm looking at it right now. I don't know how many books are in it. Looks like maybe 3 or 4. I have not picked up others in the series. I did wind up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I might pick up the second one, but I have so many books on my TBR that I'm just like, But I do believe all of his books are quick reads, so if I'm in the mood for a quick read or need something to just fill in some gaps in my TBR, then I might grab the second one. After that, I read Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, and I loved this book. This was a pick for my book club, and I didn't know anything about it. I know my mother-in-law had read it and that she enjoyed it, but that's all I knew. I originally started reading this book and just did not like it in the beginning. I don't know if it was just not a good time for me to start it or what the case was, but I loved the character Eleanor after a little while once you really get to know her. And I say that because you really do get to know her. I just fell in love with her. I thought the character development in this book was superb. I loved the dark humor. I loved the seriousness at the end. It was something I was not expecting. And it just, the fact that by the end, I was so in love with this character, that ending made me just love her even more. So that one was definitely a book I recommend to anyone. I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5. No, I'm sorry. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it that much. I gave it 5 stars. After that, I read The String Diaries by Stephen Lloyd Jones. This one, if you've watched my really weird books video, which I'll link below, you'll know that I felt that this book was really, really weird. Not necessarily in a bad way though. I did wind up enjoying it, but I just thought like the whole storyline was super weird. Like there was this monster chasing these people and you didn't know why, and it turns out the monster's like this supernatural being from another century, and he like follows this specific line of family members because he was basically hurt by this woman in his own century. And anyways, I actually did enjoy it. I wound up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, and I want to say it's also part of a series. I don't think I'm going to read the rest of them. I think that one is fine just on its own. But if you're in the mood for a really weird read, The String Diaries. After that, I read Becoming by Michelle Obama, and how can you not love this book? She's just such a wonderful, wonderful human being, and she is just so inspiring. And this was the first book I purchased after my amazing bookcase was built. The bookcase behind me actually goes all the way to the ceiling. If you follow me on Instagram, you can see a picture of that. And this was the first book I purchased to go on my new shelf, and I thought that was just perfect because I just love her. She's such an amazing person. Then I read All That Is Solid Melts Into Air. And this one was definitely unique. It's about the Chernobyl tragedy in the 80s. And I'll be completely honest with you, I didn't really know anything about the Chernobyl tragedy. I never learned anything about it. I had maybe heard of it, but I really didn't know anything behind it. I know that there was also a TV show that was coming out surrounding that historic event. So I decided, hey, I have this book. My mom gave it to me, and I think I'm going to go ahead and read it. It seems like a good time. I really liked this book. I thought that the beginning was really slow, but my biggest complaint about this book is the ending. I really felt like none of the little stories in this book were at all tied up at the end. I felt that I don't want to say the word cliffhanger because it wasn't really a cliffhanger. It just didn't really end. And I really, really felt that I needed something concrete at the end of this book, and I didn't get it. So that was disappointing. However, the whole book itself follows 4 main characters. A little boy who is like a piano prodigy who is not at all interested in playing the piano anymore. He's going through some issues at home. It then follows this family who is in this rural area who has to evacuate because of the power plant explosion. Then it follows a doctor who I think is the most fascinating part of the story. It follows this doctor who is treating people who are affected by the radioactivity, and then it follows the piano prodigy's aunt who is actually was in a relationship with the doctor, and that whole dynamic I thought was really good, but the ending fell so flat for me that I only it knocked it down to a 3-star rating for me, unfortunately. But the historical accuracies of this book, because I did wind up being very fascinated by it and I looked up a whole lot of information on it, the historical accuracies and the research this author did were very, very good. So I have to give him credit for that. I really liked that a lot. After that, I read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and That book is so good. I know that there have been some people who did not appreciate the hype or really understand where the hype came from. They didn't like the book. I am not one of them. I love the book. I think it is so good. I could not put it down. I read it in like 2 days, and seeing as I read it during my teaching year, reading something in 2 days is like near impossible. So it's a good book. It follows, well, I have to say, I hated the parents in this book. I hated them so much. And if you read the book, you really will hate, everyone should hate those parents. I can't believe they put her through all of that. I don't want to say too much about the plot of this book, but it does follow a girl who was born and raised in like the swamplands in, is it Georgia? Let me look. I'm not 100% sure. Let me look. North Carolina, I'm sorry. So it follows a girl named Kaya who lives in the marshlands of North Carolina. And she was born and raised in this area, but her mom left. Her dad was very abusive, and her mom just up and left her kids with him. Her older brothers, she was the youngest, the older brothers started to leave as well. And Kaya was left all alone with this abusive man. And at some point, she was left completely alone and basically had to raise herself. And I hate her parents so much. She was considered dirty, she was considered stupid, and no one wanted to take care of her, which is just one of the most sad things I've ever heard. In this story, a boy, like across the like river or whatever, the marsh area, finds her and they start hanging out, and he teaches her how to read, and they become very, very, very good friends. And I can't get too far into it because I don't want to give anything away, but it's like part historical fiction, part love story, part murder mystery, because there's like a murder mystery going on in it. And I actually did not know this, but this was a debut novel for this author, Delia Owens, and I have to say, A+ job. I adored it, and I recommend it to anyone. After that, I decided I wanted a quick read, something that I grabbed for like, I think it was $1 at, I'm pretty sure, the Scholastic Book Fair. Being a teacher, you get those. And it was pretty bad. It was called Darker Still by Leanna Renee Hyber. I did not like this book. I thought the historical inaccuracies were so annoying. The concept of the story is actually kind of cool. It follows this girl in like the 1800s who is mute, and she lost her voice when her mother died, and she just has not spoken a word since. And her dad, he runs an art museum, and there's this piece of artwork that she and he are very interested in. And it turns out that this painting is of like a duke, I think, who went missing, and they never found his body. They never found anything about him, and they just assumed that he is dead. However, it turns out that he was like taken by this demon spirit, and he was placed in this painting. And so he was stuck in this painting, and only she could see him move, and she could actually go in and talk to him. And I say talk because when she was in this painting like realm, she found her voice. And I do actually think the idea is really cool, but I will say it is very, very much written for like a 7th grade girl. So it fell flat for me, but I think if I was a 7th grade girl, I probably would have really liked it. I wound up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. After that was the biggest book I read in the summer. And then the summer was when I was very, very pregnant, and I was falling asleep all the time. I just could not keep my eyes open. I was also working at a community theater in my town, directing a show and teaching classes. So even though it was the summer off for my teaching career, it was not really a summer off. But I read Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. And every book I've ever read by Kristen Hanna has been a winner for me, and this one is no exception. I loved the character development. I have always said that if a book has amazing characters, it can have the crappiest plot and I'll still read it and I'll still love it. And not that this had a crappy plot because I thought it was really good, but I loved the characters specifically in the story. It follows two best friends who could not be more different. And one is ambitious in the sense that she wants a family so badly. And the other one is ambitious in terms of her career as a TV show host or like a news reporter. And it's such a good book because it really delves really deep into that aspect of serious friendship and what that means to people. Like, everybody's relationship is different and everybody's relationship is important. And this specific couple of friends, the dynamic between the two is so good and so well written. I didn't particularly like one of them that much, but I did really appreciate the writing in this book. I did only give this one a 4 out of 5 stars because, in my opinion, it wasn't nearly as good as The Great Alone, also by Kristen Hanna, but I'm a Kristen Hanna fan. What could I say? After that, I read All the Light We Cannot See. This is a World War II novel, and I have to be in the right mood for a World War II novel. This one, I felt, though, even it was the longest book I read this year, it went by so fast. And I think it's because the chapters are really short. Like, some of them are only like 2 paragraphs long. So the chapters are really, really short, which was good for me at the time because, again, I was having a hard time staying awake. So I felt like those small chunks were really easy for me to manage at that time in my pregnancy. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Not the absolute best World War II novel I've ever read, but it was certainly impactful and it was a really beautiful story. After that, I read a book that helped me so much, and that is called Oh Crap, Potty Training, Everything You Need to Know, or something like that. Oh Crap, Potty Training saved my life. It saved my life. I had absolutely no earthly idea what I was doing when it came to potty training. I just assumed my son would pick it up. Now thinking about it now, I'm thinking, like, what was going on in my head that would make me assume that my 2-year-old would just figure out how to go potty without any help. So it was not going well for us, and this book was recommended to me, and I read it cover to cover. I even highlighted and annotated, and I got ready. And I will say, if you are potty training or about to potty train, please invest the whatever $8, $9 this book costs. It will save your life. I will also tell you that the first week of potty training was like the worst week of my entire life because I was 8 months pregnant in the summer in Florida, so it was like 150 degrees out. My son was 2 and resisting. I don't know what I was thinking waiting that long to potty train him. Like, I should have done it at the beginning of the summer, but no, I waited till the last minute. But this book, honest to God, saved my whole family. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because every technique in there worked like a charm with my son. And now he's potty trained. And then, in a couple years, I'm going to have to do this all over again. After that, I read All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders, and I unfortunately did not like this book. I only gave it a 1 star. I thought the beginning was really cool. I thought the idea of it was really good, and then it got to a point where it reminded me very, very much of The Magician series by Lev Grossman, which I am not a fan of at all. I did not like those books, and this one fell flat for me. I picked it up because it was really short, and I thought, I need a short book. Like, I'm about to have a baby. I wanted something that I could start and finish before the baby was born. Yeah. So unfortunately, I ended my time of being a mom to 1 with a really not so good book because I just did not like it. Then my baby was born. Yay! Hi. I didn't do much reading for a little while, but then we discovered that my kid is really chill. So I wound up actually having some time to read, which was really nice. And I decided to pick up a Ruth Ware book because those are very quick to read. I usually pick those up if I'm in a reading rut, which I felt like I was in. So I picked up The Woman in Cabin 10, which I had never read before, and I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because I love Ruth Ware books. It served its purpose. I needed something easy to understand and something that would hold my attention and something exciting, and it was really good. This one follows a like travel magazine writer, I guess is what she's called. And she had just experienced a home break-in, and so she was going on this job on a new cruise ship, and she was already like off of her game. She felt very scared and just kind of paranoid, and weird things were happening on this ship where she went to the cabin next door and borrowed this woman's mascara. Then she feels like she witnesses the murder of this girl, and no one will confirm that this girl even exists. So this character, she's really questioning her sanity, and I can tell you in Ruth Ware style, I didn't guess what happened. I could not predict it. It is definitely an extreme, like, whoa story. I can't imagine this would actually ever happen, which is fine by me because I don't want this to ever happen, but I really enjoyed the book, and if you're looking for another good thriller to read this year, I recommend The Woman in Cabin 10. All right, so after that, I was out of my reading rut. I was ready to go forward with my reading list and read as much as I could in 2019 and hopefully hit my goal, which I got really close. And so I read Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. I'm actually shocked I hadn't read this book yet because it was really, really hyped up for a really long time. And I can tell you, it didn't disappoint. I absolutely adored the characters in this book. I think I've said that like a dozen times in this video already, but I loved them. Except for Patrick. I hated Patrick. Just like, get out of her life, Patrick. This story follows a woman who becomes a caretaker of a paraplegic. Is it paraplegic? Quadriplegic? Uh-oh. Let me get my terms right. Well, listen. On Goodreads, it just says wheelchair-bound Will Trainer. So we're going to go with wheelchair-bound Will Trainer. He had been in an accident, and he was, living his life, and it was a large life to live. And so this accident really killed his spirit. Louisa became his caretaker because she had lost her job at a coffee shop and unfortunately just needed a job. And this one was presented to her, and they wind up becoming really close. And it's just a beautiful story. She's trying to, at some point, save him because he had decided that he was going to go through with assisted suicide. And I absolutely loved this story. I'm not a crier, but I can definitely tell you that this one made me emotional. My best friend also read this book this year, and I wound up getting for Christmas the second one in the series on a bargain table for like $8. How could I pass that up? So she currently has that one, and I do intend to read that at some point in 2020. After that, I wanted a quick read. I needed a good filler because I was about to have a book club meeting, but I had like 3 days. So I was like, oh, I don't want to start something big. So I picked up a really short book that has literally been on my shelf since I was in like 6th grade and haven't read. And that is called If I Should Die Before I Wake by Han Nolan. And this is a young adult, very short novel, World War II. I had actually started it like 6 or 7 times in my life, and I kept putting it down because it was so intensely sad. But this time I persevered, and I also thought it was intensely sad. But it really was a very good and well-written story. I wound up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Then that book club pick I was talking about, my book club and I met, and we decided to read The Life We Bury by Alan Eskins. This book was written very much in like a Ruth Ware style, so it is a thriller. There's this huge mystery, cannot figure it out. I did predict a couple of the things, but for the most part, it definitely surprised me in the end, and I loved the characters. The relationship between the main character's girlfriend and his brother was just so heartwarming. If you like the Ruth Ware like thriller style, this one is definitely one I'd recommend. I know that there's another one in the series. I haven't read it, but I do have it, I believe, on Scribd, so I think that that is part of my 2020 plans as well. And I wound up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I read The Bookseller by Cynthia... Let me start that over. I read The Bookseller by Cynthia Swanson, and this one had been sitting on my Kindle for a really long time, and to be honest with you, I really just needed something that I could read at the gym. I don't like bringing a book to the gym because it's really difficult for me to hold. But I did read this one on my Kindle on like the treadmill and the elliptical, and I really liked it. It surprised me because I didn't know anything about this book going in. It had never been recommended to me before. I don't even really know how it wound up on my Kindle, but I had it and I was like, all right, I need something. Here it is. And it really surprised me. The ending was not something I expected in the slightest. Like, I was blown away by the ending. The beginning of the book was a little slow, but now that I've read the end and the entirety of the story, I do appreciate the beginning. But it is about this woman who owns a bookshop with her best friend, and she keeps having these dreams that feel intensely real to her. And in this dream, she's basically living a life with a man that she had never really met, but she knew who he was because of like a blind date that was set up between them. And so she's figuring out that these dreams that she's having are like, what if that blind date had actually occurred, and what if we got married? It's kind of like a what if life for her. The ending was a total surprise to me, and I really did enjoy it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I decided to jump on Booktube. Woohoo! So all of these books have already been talked about moving forward, so I'm not going to talk about them in depth, but I will mention them. I started Booktube in October, actually like October 30th, day before Halloween, and these are the books I read in November and December. I read A Million Little Pieces by James Frey, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. After that, I read The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin, and it was one of my favorite books of the entire year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't watched my reading vlog for November, I'll link it below so you can see exactly my feelings on that. After that, I read Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I do plan to read the rest of the series, if not in 2020, very soon after. After that, I read Tales of the Peculiar by Ransom Riggs. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Following that book, I read another one of my all-time favorites for the year, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I gave it an easy 5 out of 5 stars. Then started my December reading. I read The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. This one, in my opinion, was not as good as Me Before You, which was also by the same author, but I did really enjoy it. I loved the historical fiction aspect of the book, which was a little different for her as an author. And the whole setting was really unique, like mountain people and a like pack horse librarian system, and it was just very good. I wound up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read my first Colleen Hoover book. I've never read anything by her before, and I can definitely tell you I will read more by her because I really enjoyed it. I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I finally jumped in. I listened to Booktube, and I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Another easy 5 out of 5 stars. Wonderful book. I read it so fast. I read it with one of my friends, and we both really enjoyed it. And I definitely highly anticipate reading the rest of the series in 2020. After that, I read Teacher Man by Frank McCourt, and unfortunately it fell flat for me, and I only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Then I read Ghosted by Rosie Walsh. I just finished that one, and it was a slow climb. Like, it was a really, really slow book, and then all of a sudden you were like plummeting down on a roller coaster. It was very well written. I did only give it a 3 out of 5 stars because the beginning was so tedious for me to read that I wasn't enjoying it at all. But again, once I hit that one point, there was like a breaking point with this book, and then I just couldn't stop. I did predict a couple of things, but man, the twist, I knew there was going to be a twist, but I couldn't figure out what the twist was going to be. And to me, that is a good, well-written book. And then I wrapped up the year with a quick read. Really, really tried to get in the 30, but just couldn't do it. And I read a very short book. I read The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it was just cute as pie. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. So this year has not been my best for reading, unfortunately, but in the year 2020, I do plan on reading quite a bit more. My goal is to read 52 books in the year. If you have not watched my new Disney Picks My TBR game, you need to watch the video. I'll link it below because that is how my books will be picked for the year 2020. I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I did already start my first book for 2020, but I'm only about 80 pages in, and that is This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel. I've heard amazing things about this book, and so far I can definitely tell you it sums up parenthood quite well. Only 80 pages in. I've already chuckled about a dozen times because I'm like, oh God, preach it, woman. This is so right. This is so true. So I have a feeling I'm going to really enjoy this one. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and ring that bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time.